The Holy Gospel this morning is found in St. Mark in the 12th chapter. Now, as Jesus taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at the banquets. They devour widows' houses and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." So Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums, and a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth about a penny. He then called his disciples and said to him, "Truly, I tell you, this widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For on them they have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." The gospel of our Lord. You may be seated. Well, here at First Lutheran, if somebody comes up with a ministry idea, we ask 3 questions. Number 1, is it authentic? And by that we mean, is it authentic to who you are as a person or who we are as a congregation? The second question we ask is it faithful? We are part of a deep tradition in Christianity and indeed within the Lutheran faith as well. So we ask if it's faithful, and within that there's certain creativity, so it can be faithful and creative at the same time. But we want to orient ourselves to the church we're at. And the third question we always ask is, will it make a difference in the lives of people? Will it help somebody? So those 3 questions are asked of any ministry we do, and it doesn't matter whether it's a stewardship ministry or a worship ministry, a children's ministry. It has to have those 3 questions answered definitively at some place that in order for the ministry to move forward. And of all of them that sort of work, I mean, it makes sense. I'm here standing in an alb, in a stole, so we're pretty sure that the traditional questions are always asked, and we always want to help and make a difference in the lives of people. But it's the authenticity question that often pushes us. And it pushes us precisely in the same way that Jesus noticed that day he was sitting at the treasury with the disciples. Because what Jesus noticed is that people came to the treasury to put in money, that there was this woman who, in putting 2 small coins, which was all she had, she was giving out of this poverty of which is her life. And giving the money away was not going to make her any richer, obviously, and it also wasn't going to necessarily change her poverty. But she gave out of that because that's who she was. She didn't not give because she couldn't. She didn't pretend to give more than she had. She accepted who she was and what she was, and in her society, of course, Jesus and his world, they were one of the most misogynistic, sexist, classist societies in the history of the world. And so this woman couldn't do much more than just offer 2 copper coins, and so she did. And what Jesus noticed is that her offering those coins out of her authenticity, out of the way in which God had made her, where God had planted her, and her acceptance of that somehow she had elevated her own understanding of the world and God and even Jesus to what we are about as people. To be people who can trust that God has created us as God has meant us to be, and that God has planted us in these times and places where we're meant to be. And to have that trust that God knows what God's doing is the cornerstone of being an authentic person. Now, I use the word authenticity, and I want to quickly just delineate it for a second, because some of you might not be exactly on understanding what that's going on, at least how I'm talking about it. About 15 years ago, when I started Prairie Table Ministries, I had a core group of about 24 leaders. And they were roughly broken up into 2 groups, a group that was senior adults and a group that was young adults and parents and some of their kids. And each group had about a dozen or so in them. And we got together one evening, and we were going to talk about what were going to be the characteristics of Prairie Table Ministry there in Bismarck, North Dakota. And in the process of that, we had a little project that we did. So we took the 2 tables, and we we separated by our age groups. So the senior adults, they had one table, and then the younger adults and their children had another table. And we had this little thing where there were like 50 cards about this big, and on each card was a quality or a characteristic of a Christian church, or a Christian value, like love or forgiveness or hope or authenticity or integrity or faithfulness, generosity, those types of things. You had 50 choices. And so I put those 50 choices in the middle of each table, and then the project was this. I gave them 5 minutes for each table to pick only 3 out of the 50. They had 5 minutes, and the only deal was you all had to agree that this was one of the 3 most important ones. All right? So, go. So they went. I gave them exactly 5 minutes, and at the end of 5 minutes, each table had 3 of those characteristics. Both the older adults and the younger adults. Both of them had 3. It wasn't easy, and they all agreed, and there it was. So the first one I had the older adults go first, and the first thing they said is, Prairie Table has to have love. Now, you think about it, any Christian church should have love. It should be a prime value of any Christian church. Love seemed to be pretty much a given. And it was just so happened that the younger adults said, hey, we had that one too. I mean, what are the chances? One table could come up with it, but 2 tables? I was like, whoa, that's pretty solid. So then I went to the younger adults, and I said, well, what was one of yours? And they said, well, we want to be a family, another place where you can feel like you can trust the people. And indeed, a lot of people understand congregations as sort of a second or a third family, a place where you can develop relationships with each other. And in fact, we hold that the waters of baptism are actually thicker than blood, so that the family that we have as Christians is far larger than the family we have by blood or DNA. So to be able to be part of the Christian family, that seemed like something that those younger folks were looking for. And it just so happened that the older adults said, hey, we have that one too. And now I was completely blown away. What are the chances that they would agree on one thing, but now they've agreed on 2 things? The Holy Spirit was really working. So I went to the older adults and I said, well, what's your third and final one? And they said, integrity. Integrity. I looked at the younger adults and they were like, nah. We chose authenticity. Now, if you look at the difference between authenticity and integrity, there's really not a lot. If you hold that integrity is a prime value, it means that you think that whoever you are, all the pieces of your life have to fit together. That everything that you have done and whatever has made an integral whole to who you are. And if you're someone who believes in authenticity, you believe that as well, but rather than looking at it as a whole in which is made up of various parts, you're looking at it as a part that's trying to fit into a larger whole. You're just going at it from the other direction. So people who believe that integrity is a prime value for a human being or for a community believe that all the pieces can work and flow together somehow, even if they're not exactly sure how that happens. And people for whom authenticity is a prime value are people who say that these particular acts or these particular gifts or these particular characteristics that I have are valuable and they should be part of something larger, some larger whole. So we talked about the differences between authenticity and integrity for quite a while that night until it came to this. Basically, you can believe in authenticity or integrity. I don't care which one. They're pretty much the same thing. But the difference is when you went to second grade. If you went to second grade before 1970, chances are when I say the word integrity, you know what I mean. Because if you went to school in public schools before 1970, integrity was a big deal. But if you went to second grade after 1970, and I say the word authenticity, you're resonating with me. Because somewhere around my second grade year, that switched. I don't know why, I don't know how. But I do know that as a people, no matter how young or old we are, we all value authenticity and or integrity as a prime value in what makes us faithful. And that's precisely what Jesus noticed about this widow at the treasury. She had integrity. She had authenticity. And that's what made it valuable. The rich people, they were just giving away money. That's what rich people have to do. That's why God gave rich people money. God didn't give rich people money to hoard it. God gave them money so that they can give it away. That's what they're supposed to do. But rather, it's this woman who has nothing that gives that impresses Jesus because her authenticity is so real. Her integrity is so valuable. And that is vital to our understanding going forward, how we are going to be part of First Lutheran Church and how First Lutheran Church is going to be part of whatever God is calling us to do. It's going to happen because your integrity, your authenticity is going to continue to shine and be part of this world. And in this particular case, my friends, I cannot help you. And the reason is because right now, I have one of the least respected jobs in the world. Nobody trusts a priest or a pastor. When was the last time you read a story or an article about a priest or a pastor that wasn't abusing a child? When was the last time you read a story about a priest or a pastor that wasn't stealing money? When was the last time you read a story about a priest and a pastor who wasn't abusing their power or privilege? I'm going to guess just about never. I've been to places where people, once they find out I'm a pastor, they just walk away. They'll be having a great conversation, and when they find out what I do, they say, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to go check out what this succulent looks like over here. People don't respect me. I've seen people see me, and they walk on the other side of the road. You know, Jesus told the parable about the prodigal son, about how the Levites and the pastors walk on the other side of the road. It's completely opposite nowadays. People try to avoid me. I can't help you. God has given you these gifts. God has given you these talents that you have in order to share them with our community. And in order to have integrity and authenticity, to be able to bring them into the world. That's what it's all about. We don't emulate the widow because she gave everything she gave all she had. We emulate the widow because she was being true to who she was as a widow. And so we must begin to find ways that we can find our own authenticity, integrity going forward with ministry that we do. In this past week, for example, we've received over $80,000 in donations. $80,000 in 1 week. You know why? Because people like you believe in what God is doing. And those wallets that you're sitting on and those checkbooks in your purse are precisely your way of being able to help and show what you believe that God has gifted you to do. We are a congregation that God has placed here to be able to make a difference in the lives of people. And we're going to do it when we don't pretend to be something we're not. When we understand that we're part of a larger whole. And when what we are about is what God has created us, where God has planted us. You, as well as everybody else practically, know that I'm not supposed to be here. I was supposed to be here for 18 months tops. We put a new definition on 18 months. But it's where God planted me. And it's who I am. And we will continue to move forward as the people of God when we trust that God has given us what we have. And maybe it is in a diminished capacity compared to what it used to be, or maybe it's changed a little bit because you're no longer interested in the same things you were. That's certainly fine. But we never lose sight of the fact that through these waters of baptism, God has imparted a gift into each and every one of us. A gift that is to be shared, a gift that is to be nurtured, a gift that is to be part of what God has called us for in this world. So we're just like that widow 2,000 years ago walking towards the treasury. Oh, we know what everybody else is doing. We can see all the other people putting in their big sums of money. We can see the scribes in their long robes. But that's not us. We're just the poor beggars wandering our way towards the temple treasury, hoping that all we have is enough for God. And the beauty and grace of our God is that that is more than enough. Because all God asks of us is that we be who God created us, where God planted us.